We're now coming from a European perspective to a Berlin perspective, and I would like to share that on stage with Christine Kiefer, founder and managing director at Right Capital. Hello. Achim Oelgarth, CEO at East German Banking Association. Oh, right there. Okay. He's obviously here online. Good to see you. Hi. Christopher Zemina, co-founder of and CEO at Airbank. Right there. Hello, welcome. And Jan Kemper, CFO and COO at N26 with us online. Welcome. So I take the middle. You're free to take your microphones. Let's talk about Berlin. FinTech Growth made in Berlin. Berlin is certainly the capital of FinTech unicorns. Just a quick round of why is Berlin successful so far, Christine?
So at Right, we do community events in all different cities where we have clients, and we recently had a community event in Frankfurt. Yeah, so for me, it was a travel backward in time because I come from a classical investment banking background, and I met a lot of former colleagues who are still at Goldman or JP Morgan. And I would say the main reason why Berlin is successful because people here are hungry, they want to disrupt, they want to innovate, whereas I'd say everybody in finance in Frankfurt wants to stick to the traditional way of doing things. So I would say this hunger for disruption is probably the key success factor of Berlin.
Hungry people at Berlin, what would you say?
Yeah, I can absolutely underline this. And Frankfurt for sure is the capital of the capital, where all the capital is located, but Berlin is the capital of ideas, and where the people with ideas and the creative people are, that's what's attracting other people as well to the city.
Achim Oelgarth?
Well, I would say a little bit the same thing we saw in the United States. It's a lack of trust in traditional institutions, and you have this Silicon Valley Wall Street thing. And we saw the same and see the same thing here in Germany, but doesn't mean that Frankfurt and Berlin are not very close together.
And Jan, what about you?
It's always good to come last. Now I can only echo what the others were saying. Only thing I would add, somewhat, when I came to Berlin in 2008, 2009, there wasn't much of an ecosystem, and so I think back then, indeed, it was the drive of young people coming to the city and trying to disrupt stuff, and then building out, and that as was meant, or like was said before, I think it's still the case, no doubt about that. The ecosystem matured, no doubt. And I would also add that over the last 10, 15 years, with the initial business models we were tackling, mostly on e-commerce and the like, we realized how much of legacy there actually is in systems, more related to payment systems and the like, buy now, pay later, which from my point of view, also from a content perspective, laid the foundation of so many fintechs actually sitting in Berlin, based on the experiences was maybe what we learned over the last 10, 15 years, identifying areas and then putting talent and money on it in order to disrupt. That I think why Berlin is actually leading there.
That sounds really great from all of you. So everything's fine, Christine? Can we just leave it like that?
No, I think there are definitely a few things we can improve in the fintech scene here in Berlin.
Like what?
So when we, so everybody who's listened to the panel yesterday already heard me talking about employee stock option programs. And it's a point that's very dear to me because I think, and if we look abroad, we're at quite a disadvantage here in Germany. The Fondstandortgesetz came out last year in the summer, and it tried to improve quite a few things. I would say it was a nice attempt, but we're still very far from being really competitive. I think what we need is, first of all, revenues from employee stock options need to be taxed at the capital gains tax rate. That's one demand that we have in the startup scene. And then furthermore, the new law only tackled ESOPs, but not VSOPs. Yeah, so VSOPs are still highly disadvantageous. I also don't understand why every startup needs to find their own law firm, always needs to make that investment to have a tailor-made stock option program. I mean, the German Startup Association, they now have a template, a VSOP template on their website, which is great. It's a good leap forward. But here, if we look at the US, for example, there is so much you can just download from the Y Combinator website. So, for example, if you want to issue convertible notes, you can just download the Safe Notes template from Y Combinator. You don't have to hire a law firm. You don't, you don't need your individual setup, because that's what's hardest at the outset. That you have to make the investment. You have or you have your own legal counsel. All of this wouldn't be necessary if we just had more standards. And and I could go on and on. There's still a few very important points in the current regulation. So, for example, if you change jobs, you're still taxed. You still have the dry income tax problem, and then after 12 years as well. So, although attempts were made to improve the current legislation, I think there's still a lot we could do.
Achim, you founded the Berlin Finance Initiative, so you obviously saw some need for improvement.
Yes, thank you very much for pointing at the Berlin Finance Initiative. It is clearly an initiative, kind of an umbrella for all of us. It's all of us, basically. What is behind it? The very cool and strong growth of the techs. We have about 300 FinTechs in Berlin, and 6 out of 7 unicorns up from Berlin, and so on. We see a maturity coming that will definitely lead in more IPOs. It will lead into exits, and Berlin has to be ambitious. Berlin has to be ambitious. We will have more stock exchange listed companies in the future, and so on the way to have mature companies, the whole system, the ecosystem, the city has to support a little bit. And the Berlin Finance Initiative is somehow the circle that now combines politicians together with the industry, not only the FinTechs, but also the banks, insurance companies, in order to really frame this and to design the new network. We're thinking about, and we had workshops about it, and here Digital Hub Initiative, FinTech Berlin is closely monitoring this. We're working together on the following 4 or 5 issues. One thing is the talent. We have to be able to attract the right talents. That's what everybody says. But what does it mean for our universities and business schools in Berlin? They're very interested in getting in touch with all of you, and we're trying to find the right curriculum for them. That's one point. The other thing is, what does it mean growing a company? As some on the panel really know, as a supervisor, and we heard it in earlier speeches, same business, same risk, same rules. To be compliant and to grow as a company means you have to be able to have the right people. And it's not only the young talent, it's also the senior talent. And they need to have also the right education programs and, of course, the right regulatory framework. That leads to the third point. It is somehow the networking, but it is more meant by proximity to the regulator. Bundesbank has the hub in Berlin. BaFin had and has BaFin Tech in Berlin. We see very important BaFin being much closer and understanding, talking the same language. But this is also meant towards the consumer protectionist. So this network and this institutional framework being in a regular exchange with them to understand better and to really improve the regulatory framework and not having this far distance to the other places. And there are a couple of more points. One is definitely that we need to have also somehow a place. What is the financial center of Berlin? So we're planning together with the city to establish Berlin House of Finance and Tech. This is a new kid on the block. We are thinking about it. There's a lot of support behind it. And not only do you have a phone number for also international players and regional players, but also creating kind of a think tank. And here comes the last point. It's a very huge advantage of Berlin, the cooperation with Mittelstand and also the industry, because finance has a meaning. It's a service for the clients, and especially the services toward the Mittelstand looks deeper. We have to look deeper into the sustainability topic. But I want to stop here at the point. There's so many parts we would like to focus stronger in order to have the ecosystem with Berlin, but also the other hubs in Germany to be prepared for even brighter future. Thank you.
So thank you. Network is a huge key point. Money is the other point. There's a lot of money coming from business angels right now. What about venture capital? How can that be increased, from your opinion?
So Airbank coming to Berlin was pretty much venture capital is pretty much a reason why Airbank came to Berlin, founded by an Austrian and a Brazilian. There are many cities to choose, and Berlin last year collected 10.5 billion euros. 60% of all the venture capital in Germany went to Berlin, and it's a strong sign for the city already. And this obviously comes from years of network building, and with N26 and a couple of others of these shooting stars, they have built the foundation for all of this. But then again, what is missing are central institutions, be it from a public or a private hand, that are bringing this all together. And we don't even have to go all the way to America to look for comparisons. We only have to go to Frankfurt. When I think about Frankfurt, which is a third or maybe a quarter of the fintech size of Berlin, you immediately think about the tech quartier, which brings together all of the startups and tries to care for them. And something like this, I'm incredibly glad that the House of Finance and the Berlin Finance Initiative is starting, and that Achim is building that network. But at the end of the day, it will come down to the leadership in corporates and in public institutions, and pretty much everyone in this room today, to support these initiatives and make sure that today's and future founder will have these central institutions that they can go to, because then the venture capital also has a place where they can deploy the money into.
I'm just noticing you're not Christopher Zemina.
No, I'm his replacement, so I don't want to be the imposter. I'm the Berlin equivalent to Christopher, the one of the first on the team, but not Christopher.
And you do have a name.
I'm Alex, of course.
Alex Müller, welcome on stage from Airbank as well, obviously.
Also from Airbank, yes.
So good that we got that straight by now.
Yeah, we've been so quickly into the conversation, I didn't want to
I noticed that. So, but I saw your sign, so we got that straight. Thanks for your answer. You, Christina, founded the FinTech Ladies. So that is obviously a women's network. Why did you think that is necessary? I mean, there are several women's networks. Why was especially that necessary?
So again, my background is in classical investment banking. I worked in London for 5 years at an American investment bank, and there diversity is really important. Yeah, so racial, gender, yeah, any aspect of diversity is very important for American banks. But then I moved to Berlin in 2012, and the startup scene wasn't very diverse, yeah. So most of the founders the unicorn founders are around 40 years old, and they come from a couple universities that we all know, like Mannheim, EBS, WHU. And I found that in general there were very few female founders and very few women in management positions. There was a female community starting out around Verena Pauster, who started the Ladies' Dinner. Back then it was 25 female founders, but mostly in, let's say, e-commerce space, nobody really with a tech focus, and I wanted to find other women with whom I can talk about my day-to-day work. So at I met Miriam Wohlfahrt, who at the time, well, she founded RatePay, and I was the MD of BillPay, so we were competitors, so to say. And and we said, well, let's start a dinner, and we invite all other women whom we know in fintech. It was 5 of us, the very first dinner. But from there onwards, and it was in 2016, the network grew and grew, and now we're more than 1,000 women across different cities, in Frankfurt, in Munich, in Vienna. And what's very nice to see is that gender diversity in fintech is becoming much more balanced, although it is, of course, difficult. You don't have a lot of women in tech, you don't have a lot of women in finance, so of course, at the intersection, it's also hard for recruitment. Some fintechs do better than others, and of course, it helps when you have a female founder or there are women at the top. When you don't make diversity a priority from the start, it's really hard to change things around. So I think N26, I think, is not a prime example for gender diversity, because there was not enough emphasis from the start. So I think that's something as a founder you have to get right from the beginning. And we in the network, we try to help. Sometimes founders approach us and say, how do I go about diversity? Can you help? And what we do is we organize workshops. We call them deep dives, where we visit fintechs. They get to introduce their business model, talk about an interesting topic, like Solaris Bank, for example, when they switch from a hierarchical structure to a matrix structure. It was a very interesting conversation. So that's what we do in the network, and all the ladies here in the room, you're invited to join us.
I was going to say that whoever feels attracted by that can come up to you, obviously. Jan, when your co-founders decided to come to Berlin quite a while ago, why did they come here back then?
Quickly answer that question, but I also have one wish or one ask. When we just talked about capital 1 second ago, no, they came to Berlin pretty much due to the same reasons. I mean, they worked for Rocket Internet before, so had some entrepreneur in residence experience with some business models, and then as they established their network and saw the growing scene and also the potential with potentially being like fintech being the next big thing where you could enter to, that was a logical step to actually then extend the stay in Berlin and start the company from there, given all the benefits they could use. But we can combine it with my second point. So I spent the last almost 13, 14 years in the Berlin ecosystem, had the benefit of working with 5 scale-ups for now in different industries, and was lucky enough to raise about 6 to 7 billion over that time frame. And what really annoyed me the most is that at a certain point in time, we always didn't find the amount of money we were needing after Series C, Series D or the like, and had to go either to the US or to Asia in order to find the investors that were actually willing to fund us. And then with also successful companies coming out, which back then I was not able to say, like Zalando or the like, highly profitable, being listed, pretty much all the wealth creation also went away from Germany and or Europe, however you want to define it, and actually moved over to the investors that were willing to take the risk or by bylaws were able to actually invest in there. If I could ask for one thing in this round, but also for everyone who's involved in Berlin, that still needs to change. There was a lot of movement, and we see also the smaller companies, VC funds and the like getting bigger. But if I look at least the rounds I had to organize over the last 10 to 15 years, it always broke at around Series C, Series D, where there's not the ecosystem in Germany and or Europe that is able to cope for those big rounds. And that is where you sell your company, or you have to sell your company as a founder into a different jurisdiction. And then when the company finally breaks even, generates profits, those profits are not here anymore and cannot foster the ecosystem. Yeah, neither via exit gains that can flow back into the system, nor via taxes. And that, if I had one big ask, I can only repeat myself, that's mine.
Well, you have us on your side, obviously, so that's for sure. We were talking about talents. You were mentioning some challenges that are there when it comes to attracting talents here in Berlin. What countries or what regions are doing it better than Berlin? Where can we actually, or can Berlin actually learn from, and what are they doing better or more effective?
I think not just in the startup scene, maybe not just for attracting talent in general, bureaucracy is a big problem in Germany, but in Berlin we're really, really slow, when it comes to organizing visas, for example. I mean, we really rely on international talents. Yeah, it's such a pain for everyone to find software engineers. So there are now startups with the business model, to get talent from abroad and to Germany, like Localize, for example, or Work Motion. So their entire business model is just spanning just around this question: how do we bring talent to Germany? And and I think here also we could make things easier for startups. I mean, we're all looking to Eastern European countries, where now actually we're finding good software engineers from Nigeria, for example. But the main motivation is very often to come to Germany, and it's still a lengthy process.
Achim, Oelgarth, what would you say?
Well, I wouldn't be so negative. Berlin has been and still is so attractive for talent. And yes, I share a little bit your views, but on the other hand, the living costs are still much lower than in other places, and asking for places, London, Paris, etc. But it is true that we have to manage better in Berlin to have this one-stop shop. Yeah? Because I can tell you, the visa you can have the next day, but you have to know the right people. And it also costs a lot of money. And here money for, let's say, bureaucracy is rare with startups. And here I think the city helps a lot already, but we can get better. With respect to technology, well, of course, we see that Stockholm has a very good ranking in the world because of its ecosystem. And yes, we have to be ambitious to really develop, meaning educate the best people, and having an excellence approach from Berlin. That's why I mentioned earlier the universities that have to get closer into relation with you fintechs, but also in curricula that really matches your long list of applications that are definitely the problem. I would see Berlin still in a very good position, but the competitors, well, I've problems pointing at other places. Berlin is still the place to be, and especially when we see now with all the stress towards the east, Berlin is still somehow a safe harbor for many talented people from Eastern Europe, and I wouldn't see it so negative.
And you'd say Berlin will be the place to be in 20 years from now on?
Wow, 20 years, that's far too long. We think more in 3 months, and the next year, just imagine in this room here, what do we know what will happen end of this year? I think the question is not fair. We should ask better, do we manage in the fintechs and startups to have a lower churn rate? It's not looking only at external factors, also to internal factors. And Christina, I visited your place. We'll have a nice barbecue soon there. You set good incentives to stay at your company. And so I'm asking also all of you here, be good employers.
So that's one thing, being good employers. And to me, many of the demands that you have, or the challenges that you have in the scene seem to be political demands. Do you see that there's a gap between the political area and the fintech scene? Do you feel that's well connected?
Well, there are institutions like Achim's to bridge the startup scene with, for us, the regulatory scene, as we are heavily dependent on fintech regulation and innovation in that space. When it comes to employment and talent, that's pretty much still something I think that most of the startups are figuring out themselves on the go as the challenges arise. One of the case examples that we have, a Croatian web developer that cannot work for us more than 20 hours per week, because otherwise he'd slip into this very famous Scheinselbstständigkeit, artificial self-employment, and but also can't come to Germany due to family reasons. We are living in a remote world where we can employ talent from all over the world, but we can't because of a potential legal threat down the line if we were to overstep any of the employment regulations that are not really made for a startup world nor for a remote and global world.
Yeah, and how do you see the connection between politics and the fintech scene in Berlin?
I'm actually a bit more with Achim, and saying, if I compare that with the situation like 10, 15 years ago, that were like two different worlds not talking to each other. Startup or tech scene in general and politics, that was just like, okay, and nobody believed that actually the tech ecosystem could become a meaningful driver also of the economy a bit further down the road. I think now over the last 5 to 8 years, I mean, there has been a change of mind, specifically in the political scene, and also with more and more politicians actually making the step, really digging deep, understanding, engaging into discussions, and same holds true also on the startup side, where most likely 10 years ago we said, no, that is not really worth the effort. But now seeing building bridges actually works out, specifically when you work on the big topics we already mentioned, like visa, ESOP, or the like, where we're not there where we need to be. Specifically when you tie it to how can we ensure that also in 10 years, 20 years, and 25 years from now, Berlin is an attractive place, but it's definitely moving into the right direction. However, in some of those elements, indeed, the devil is in the detail, where the bridges you build on the highest level, when there's an agreement, does not necessarily mean that one-to-one, then on a practical level, you have a solution, meaning the progress we made on the ESOP side, where ESOP is excluded, as Christina mentioned. When you look at the visa side, where you say, yes, I mean, it's helping also that you have the blue card, but specifically when you look at juniors, where it's extremely difficult to fulfill the harsh requirements that are in there. So where it's more like overarching, we're moving into the right direction, but I think, we need the next wave in order to really make it gel also on a day-to-day basis.
And what do you think?
May I add one thing here?
Sure.
I know the figure. It's like 1,200, 1,300 euro just to do the bureaucracy behind each employee, and hire 10, and makes 12, and so on. I think here we have to get better to lower the costs on such processes for the industry. But just an addition on this.
Yeah, so lower the costs and initiating. Were you going to respond to that, Christina?
Yeah, I actually wanted to elaborate on the points that Jan made, because I also see a lot of progress from both sides, both from politics and also the startup scene. So I just want to mention the initiatives that I see and that I like the FinTech Council that was established under Jens Spahn, which is now called the Digital Finance Forum, under Christian Linde. I mean, their politics, the BMF, they're looking for input from the startup scene, and I think that's really great. And then also the German startup scene has become more political. There's a German Startup Association, which was founded, I think, 10 years ago. And now with Christian Miele, you see so many things moving forward. They're really great initiatives, but also other people from the startup scene like Verena Pauster or Sophie Pollock, who motivated the Stay on Board, #StayOnBoard, change in favor for women, to stay on board, literally. So I think there is a lot happening, and I think it's all moving in the right direction. And in particular from the German Startup Association, I'm quite happy what I see, what's happening.
So, Jan, you were talking about waves in which things happen and in which things improve. What initiates those waves?
I would say first brave people doing the first step. As we've seen maybe in between 2005 and 2008, was the first wave of copy kids coming to Berlin, executing extremely well. And then, as it comes in waves, as we've also seen in the US, you have the first exits, people making some money, reinvesting it into the ecosystem that becomes more attractive from people, as Achim mentioned, from universities. But we also had to inject that in the bigger cities like Aachen, like Berlin, like Munich, like Hamburg, where 10, 15, 20 years ago, nobody wanted to start a company. That maybe came from the universities Christina mentioned. And that is why, such founders are over prominent in the scene already. But when you look at some of the last 5 years, where also very diverse founders like Narim from Omio, or the like came to Berlin, and diversity is increasing on many dimensions, I think I'm very optimistic that 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road, you will have an equally diverse ecosystem like we have in the US, with more and more money floating in, given more exits, we're having more companies being listed or the like. So I personally believe, the cycles have been, it was difficult to start it off, and cycles have been slower. But I personally believe there will be an acceleration coming, given all the initiatives we touched base on today.
So you all seem pretty satisfied with the situation in Berlin. I could sum up, if you were still to make one wish, if I was a politician, I'd give you the chance to say, this I would change, or this I would like to initiate, or to be different right now, what would it be?
Yeah, coming back to my first point, if there's one thing I could change, it's the employee share programs.
That's that. Achim?
Well, embrace technology. We've heard so much this morning about with cool keynotes. Embrace success, and don't only look for angst.
Yeah. So when you say that, it kind of sounds like you feel politicians are afraid of tax.
Nah, they want to be responsible, and we don't talk the same language for all of us. Not everything is understandable. Well, I'm not a politician, but as what Christina is doing deep dive in each business model, in looking, I think the dialogue has to be closer to understand each other better. What is going on? What is possible? What improves your life? And also talking fair about risks. That's fair lobbying, not only saying everything is bright, also saying, well, here maybe we have to be a little bit careful, and then evolve a framework around it. But this is, I think, is happening in the fora Christina mentioned, and so we have an improvement also on the political dialogue. But my wish is think positive about innovation and technology.
Okay, Jan, what would you say?
Yeah, overarching buzzword, access to capital. Yeah, so facilitate access to German, or we start Berlin, but German and then European capital, in order to eventually, if the ecosystem believes in the long-term success of here FinTech companies, that the value creation that eventually will happen stays in the local ecosystem and further facilitates it.
So if I get you right, if you were to make the choice again where to put your headquarters, you would choose Berlin again?
As it stands today, yes.
All right. What's your wish?
My wish would be for the startup scene to be celebrated equally as the automotive industry as a major contributor to jobs and wealth generation in Germany.
Why do you fear that is not the case right now?
Because when we talk about what is the major business motor of Germany, it's automotive and not technology.
And why do you think politicians haven't recognized that yet?
Because startups are inherently related to risk, but the automotive industry is established and traditional, and it's easier to rally behind the stable existing system.
Is that about communication, what Achim mentioned, that there needs to be more dialogue? And then the question, is it the politicians that need to come up to the fintech scene, or the other way around, or both sides? What do you expect?
It's both. It's both on us to keep pushing the message, but it needs to be received on the other side just as well.
Okay, so that's that. Well, I thank you. Is there anything in the audience that wants to be asked right now? I can assume when we talk about Berlin, there's some question. Anyone who wants to raise a question? The chance is now. That's not the case. So when we talk about Berlin and about the people here, from your experience the last years, where do you see Berlin? I'm always about 10 years, 20 years. I know you think in 3 months. That's not my perspective here. I want to see 10 years. Where are we then? Are we equal, women, men? Is the fintech scene where it wants to be?
So maybe, to go back to the topic of funding, what I've seen over the recent years is that it's easy to get, I would say it's becoming increasingly easier to get funding from business angels at pre-seed and seed stage. Yeah, they're stronger angel networks. They're now stronger female business angel networks, which is something I really like, because still a too small portion of the VC funding goes to female founders. Yeah, but this is changing because all the VCs have recognized that they need more female staff and more female partners. So so the female founded businesses are understood and appreciated. Yeah, so I think there's a good trend that has started, and I hope this trend is going to accelerate even more. And Jan made a really good point. Actually, I think we're also doing fine in terms of Series A and Series B funding, but all the later stage funding, the growth funding, is still difficult. And why is that? Well, it's because in the US, for example, it's more common for pension funds to invest in the asset class VC. And there we still have disadvantageous legal framework. I think because of the Solvency Directive, the capital requirements for pension funds are still really high, which makes the asset class VC funding unattractive. Yes, so that's still a structural disadvantage that we could solve over the next years. And I think if that happens, then we would eventually see larger funding rounds also at later stage, which would help to increase the number of European unicorns.
So that needs to be overcome. When we talk about diversity, in this case, we talk about men and women, but diversity is not only that, as we know. Is that true? Something that we need to consider in the future more than now?
Yeah, I think so. Because, I mean, what are the US doing well? I mean, there's a nation of immigrants. Yeah, and immigrants, there are studies that show that immigrants are more likely to start a company. And I think that's something US is still doing much better than we are. Yeah.
So how do you view that, Jan? Diversity, not only men and women, but in many aspects?
Absolutely. Because in the end, I mean, if 10 years down the road, we're all sitting in Berlin with an equal share of men and women all coming from WHO, I'm not so sure if we are so heterogeneous in thinking and pushing things forward. It definitely needs to be along different dimensions in order to have that creativity and different thinking on problem solving, not only to execute on ideas, but specifically on identifying the opportunities and then pushing out. And every successful founder from a different angle, again, will act as a role model, and 10, 100, 150 will follow. And that is the most important part. So there were some early folks starting in 2008. Now we have different streams, which is great. And hopefully, 5 years, 10 years down the road, we have an equally diverse ecosystem as we have in the US.
Achim, how important is that to you?
Everything that has been said is extremely important. I see down the road in 10 years, first of all, yes, more sustainability. The ESG topic hasn't been touched too much here, will be in the DNA of the fintechs. Diversity will move forward, but it should always make economical sense. We made, by the way, the study on this that shows that we need much more money also in the female fintech. Second of all, we will see some IPOs, and hopefully, and yes, in Berlin, that will give a good example for the whole ecosystem and also for the money that flows into Berlin, that it is worth it because it creates value. So the whole fintech sector will be much more secure, and Frankfurt will move a little bit closer to Berlin because the whole fin and tech scene sees its home also in Berlin and not only in Frankfurt.
Okay, well, thanks a lot. I'm giving you again the chance to ask for a second. That's not the case. Thanks a lot to the four of you for being here, for sharing your knowledge, your insight, and your opinion, especially that I wanted to know. And you have a great day, and you have a great conference day as well. And thanks for joining online, Jan and Achim.
Thanks for the great moderation, Katrin.
Thank you.
For